Okay, here's an example of one of the divide line segments. So A, B, and C are collinear. B is between A and C, and the ratio for line segment AB and to AC is 1 to 4. So we have A, we have B, and we've got to find C. So basically, you know the first point, you know the midpoint, you don't know the last point. So an easy way to do this, we could use midpoint formula and plug it in and then solve. It's not as easy. This is a little bit easier, makes more concrete sense. So we know that from this section, get a different color here, this section A to B right here, whatever its value is, its distance is 1 compared to whatever B to C is, wherever it ends up. Let's say it's way over here. Wherever it ends up is 4. So that means if this was 1 unit, we'd times that by 4, and that's how much further it is away. So we're going to look and see first on our x's. How do we get from x from A to B? How far was it? And how do we get from y's? So let's look at the x's first. So we're going to look at how do we go from -7 to -3? How far is that? And so if you're thinking about just going from x's, we know that here is one of our x's and here is another. Well, if we count those, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We can easily say -7 minus 3, we get 4. So we know from here to here is 4. So our x's to go, we have 4. Okay, now let's look at our y's. So how do we go from here to here? So if we look at our y's and we'll think about 1 being here and 1 being here, we can see this is 1, 2, 3. So we went 3. So that was a movement of 3. So if we want to know how far, thinking of our x's from A is to where C is going to be, if this was 4, our x's were 4, and this is a ratio of 1 to 4, we can multiply 4 times 4 and we get 16. Okay, so that means from this point all the way to this x value is going to be 16. Okay, so we have to move 16 points in our x's. All right, for our y's, it was 3. Well, 3 times 4, because it's a ratio of 1 to 4, we multiply 3 times 4 and we get 12. So our y's have to move 12. So now let's think about how do we use that information now to get our C. So we start with A. A was -7. We're going to add our 16 on our x's. So -7 plus 16 gets us 9. So that means this x is going to be 9. Then we're going to add our 12 to our y. So -8 plus 12 gets us 4. So our y is 4. So that means our point for C is 9, 4. And you would see that the ratio there is 1 to 4. All right, here's another example. So we're given A, B. We don't know C. C is our other endpoint. We're given a midpoint. And our ratio this time is A, B. So from here to here is 2. And from B to C is 1. That means the segment from A to B is 2 times more than B to C. So let's now find out how far the points are on our x's. So we're going to start with what we know. So we're going to start at A and B. So we're going to look at the 7 and the 1. So we're going to take the midpoint, 1, minus the 7, and we're going to get -6. Well, that means from A to B, it is -6 away. We had to move -6 to get to that next point, and that is 2 times what BC is. So to do that, instead of multiplying, we are going to actually divide by 2, or you can multiply by half. So divide by 2. So if we divide by 2, we end up with a -3. So that's how much further we're going to get to C. Okay, -3. So now we're going to do the y's. So -6 minus, in this case, a -2, which we know this is -6, plus 2, which gives us a -4. Now, we're going to multiply by half or divide by 2, and we get a -2. So now we know how far those segments are, and so to find our C coordinate, we're actually going to start this time with B. So we're going to start right here, and we're going to add what we know, how far we travel. So this was our x's, and this was our y's. So we're going to add. So 1 plus a -3 gives us -2. And then our y's, we have a -6 plus a -2 gets us negative 8. So our point here is negative 2 and negative 8. That's your answer. So here's another example of one you've seen on divide line segment. So find coordinates of point B on AC such that AB is 1/5 of AC. So we know B is going to be somewhere in the middle. So we're looking for where exactly is it. So the first thing you need to do is use some kind of knowledge of Pythagorean theorem. You can kind of make this out to be a right triangle. So I'm going to kind of rough sketch this. And we're going to find out how far the distances are for our y values and our x values like we did on the previous ones. So if I count from A all the way over to this right angle here, I get 15 units. If I count from the C point down to this right triangle area, I get 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So I know that I moved my x's over 15 and I moved my y's 5. So now I'm going to use that knowledge of 1/5 to help me find out the points for B. So I know that AC, the direction from AC from here all the way to here is 15. And I know that 1/5 of that, so 15 times 1/5 gets me 3. Okay. The vertical direction, I have 5, and if I multiply that times 1/5, I get 1. So the coordinates of B, if we move up or move left, because we know it's somewhere in between here. So if we move our x's, we're going to move 3. So 1, 2, 3, and we're going to move up towards our line 1. Our point here for B is right here. So now let's find out what that is. So let's count that. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we know it's 5 on the x. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the y. So our point is 5. It's a positive 5 and a negative 7. So our answer will be positive 5, negative 7. Okay, here's our last one that I'll do. This one's one of the most missed. This ratio is 4:5. So we have A, B, and C. B's between A and C. We're given A and B, so we know the midpoint. We don't know the other endpoint. So first thing we're going to do is find our differences, or how far did we travel in the x direction to go from A to B. So we're going to take B first. So 1 minus a negative 3. And when we subtract that, we end up with 4. And we're going to do the same thing for x. Negative 5 minus negative 7. Excuse me, not negative 7, just 7. And we get negative 12. So this is our x movement, how far we moved, and this is our y movement, how far we moved. So now we're going to think about the ratios. From here to here is 4, compared to A to C is 5. So this one's a little bit different because we have A to B is 4 and A to C is 5 instead of comparing 2. So we have to think about this. Our movement here of 4 for our x's is the same thing as saying 4/5, 4 over 5, times whatever our h is going to be, our height is going to be, our x is going to be, times our x value here. So that's what we have to look for. So we're going to solve now for the x. So when we multiply, we want to clear up that fraction. So I can multiply the whole thing by 5, do it that way, and I end up with 20 equals 4. X, divide by 4, x equals 5. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing for the y movement. So I have negative 12, and then I'm going to take it and do the same thing. It's equal to 4/5. But this time times the vertical distance, which is the y. And so I have, clear my fraction, I have 5, I have 60, negative 60 equals 4y, divide by 4, and I get y equals a negative 15. So that's how much I moved. So now I'm going to use that to find my coordinates of C. All right, so now that you know how far you move for your x's and how far you move for your y's, you're now going to use that to find out your c values. So you start with your a. So your a for your x was -3. You're going to add your 5, so that is 2. For your a, your y was 7, and you have -15, and that gives you a -8. So your points are 2 and -8.